Anna.
I'm Maddie.
And we are doing our presentation via video because I have to leave. But
So we are doing the Cold War radiation experiments. So during the Cold War, there were many experiments done using a radioactive material through about the 40s through the 70s, and specific universities conducted these experiments, such as Harvard University, as well as Massachusetts Institute of Technology and the Fernald School in Massachusetts as well. These experiments, they involved humans. They would inject radioactive substances into the body to see how the body would react or digest them. And these studies were conducted usually on prisoners, pregnant women, mentally challenged or mentally ill people, babies. So people that had low IQs, which made it easier for them to convince them to give consent to these experiments.
so the first one we'll talk about is Fernald School, which is in Massachusetts. This is a little disturbing, but this is the one where they used about 19 teenage boys who were mentally ill. So they were unable to consent to anything except for taking vitamins, which they were unaware these vitamins had radiation in them. They were radioactive, so it was like calcium and iron supplements that they thought they were just taking their daily pills, but in all reality they would like put the ones that were more able to consent they would put in their milk and hide, but the ones that had no idea they would give to these patients. And this was in like the late 1940s, early 50s. But yeah, there was no consenting, there was no knowledge to these boys of what was happening.
The next experiment we're going to talk about involved babies. So these kind of experiments were conducted in multiple different states, and at least 235 newborns were injected with a radioactive substance. It was a radioactive form of iodine, and the reason that they were injecting these babies with this radioactive substance was to evaluate how a normal thyroid gland worked in a newborn, a healthy newborn. So these babies could obviously not give consent to be in these experiments, and so yeah, the main goal was to just evaluate their thyroid glands.
The last specific one, this obviously there's like not a ton of information about the ones that were past the Cold War, so in like the 60s and 70s, because of it being government funded. So like they didn't put out a whole lot of information. But an experiment that the Defense Department did was injected cancer patients with radiation that was like tested on these patients. Like they did not know anything about it except that it was not very safe. So 9 of the first 40 patients that were injected with this radiation were pronounced dead within 30 days. So it was ethically, it was very negligence, I would say, is the best way to describe that. But yeah, for all the ethics for all these experiments, obviously all of these are very unethical, but negligence is a huge one for pretty much all of them, because none of these patients were treated as they should have been. Intentional infliction of emotional distress, because like these mentally ill patients, these babies, like none of these consent, none of them know what's happening, and they're forcing upon these patients. Respondent superior, that's when the government was paying these doctors to perform these tasks when really they obviously should not have, because they knew it was dangerous. And then uninformed consent, obviously these newborn babies and these mentally ill, and like they just were not able to consent, so that is a huge problem.
So now for the punishment. So there was not any information on what happened to the doctors or the nurses or any of the staff that were involved in the experiments, but what we could find was that the government actually compensated many of these families. Multiple millions of dollars went out to about 12 families to compensate for the victims who went through the experiment. And the Energy Secretary, Hazel O'Leary, she actually she helped with this, and a hotline was set up so that radiation victims could call and come forward and go through with trying to get some compensation for what they went through. And now she works alongside medical and legal experts chaired by a medical ethicist Ruth Faden at the Johns Hopkins University. And their goal is to find radiation victims, go through documents, and find the test subjects to determine if any violations of ethics occurred. And so far, there have been about 700 congressional hearings related to the radiation experiments, and the government paid out about $4.8 million to settle 12 cases, which were also related to the experiments during the Cold War.
And there is our... We're excited.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks.